paranormal that cannot be explained by scientific methods.
Told of a creature that was 6.5 to 7 feet tall.
The CIA ran secret mind control experiments.
It's a tale of a creature that's been seen by many, but believed by few.
And experts say there have been reported sightings of paranormal activity.
And there was this creature, and it ran down this hill.
They say something was flying over their house, and they have no idea what it was.
How the world's most powerful individuals are actually shape-shifting reptilians.
My scariest ghost hunting experience.
Jason and JV.
You want answers? I think I'm entitled. You want answers? I want the truth. You can't handle the truth. Can't handle the truth. Put it down.
Beyond reality. Radio.
Welcome to the world of the unusual, the bizarre, and even the macabre. This is Beyond Reality Radio. Hello, everybody. Jason and JV have the week off. They're on vacation. My name is Bruce Marcuson. I'm glad to be with you as the guest host. And tonight our topic is going to be witchcraft. We have two guests coming up this evening, Christopher Orapello and Tara Love Maguire. They have a brand new book that is out as of just a few days ago, December the 1st. The book is called Besom, Stang, and Sword, a guide to traditional witchcraft, the sixfold path, and the hidden landscape. We're going to talk about traditional witchcraft, regional witchcraft, explain the title, and really kind of offer a little bit of a primer into witchcraft, explain some of the terminology that's not only evident in the title, but also explained in a book that has been receiving excellent reviews. So we're very glad that Christopher and Tara Love will be joining us in just a few moments. As we get things started on this program, a Tuesday night, I want to remind you about our website. It is beyondrealityradio.com. Again, beyondrealityradio.com. If you go to the website, we have a chat room. We encourage you to take part in the chat, offer your thoughts on how I'm doing, what the guests have to say. Have a good give and take in the chat room. Also, you can follow us on Facebook at Beyond Reality Radio. In addition, you can follow us on Snapchat and Instagram. All of these are great ways to keep tabs with the show, not only during the program, but at other times as well. And if you'd like to follow me on Facebook, I have a brand new page that I've come up with. It's called Bruce Marcuson's Ghostly Gallery. I deal with all sorts of stuff, horror, sci-fi, supernatural, paranormal, popular culture, and, of course, talk about this show as well. So please go to Bruce Marcuson's Ghostly Gallery, follow me, like me. I'll be very happy if you do so. And great way to keep up with me and, of course, to keep up with this program as well, Beyond Reality Radio. A little bit later on in the week, Wednesday night, we will have Christopher Fulton on with us. He is the author of The Inheritance, Poison Fruit of JFK's Assassination. He has come forward for the first time to give the country and the world some answers, some 55 years after the assassination of JFK. Then on Thursday's program, our guest is going to be Jonathan Gabriel, also an author. He describes himself as an infinite investigator. We'll be discussing synchronicity, connecting to the infinite in a finite existence, and numbers as spiritual connections to the cosmic soup. So that's Jonathan Gabriel coming up on our Thursday night show. But tonight, a Tuesday night, we will be talking about witchcraft. Our guests, Christopher Orapello, Tara Love Maguire, talking about their new book, Besom, Stang, and Sword. Stay with us. We're just getting started on Beyond Reality Radio.
Her hair is hollow gold,
We are just getting started, a Tuesday night edition of Beyond Reality Radio. Jason and JV have the week off. They're enjoying a little bit of wintertime vacation. My name is Bruce Markuson. Glad to be with you and glad to be talking to our two guests who are going to be joining us momentarily. They are authors of a brand new book, Besom, Stang, and Sword, a guide to traditional witchcraft, the Sixfold Path, and the Hidden Landscape. Let me introduce each of the two guests. We have Christopher Orapello. Christopher is co-host of the very popular pagan podcast, Down at the Crossroads. He is a tarot enthusiast, also is a proud South Jersey Freemason, spends his time podcasting, writing, sculpting, and practicing witchcraft with the Black Tree Coven. Tara Love Maguire has been a practicing witch for over 30 years on a path that has been influenced by the likes of Isabel Gowdy, Marie Laveau, and William S. Burroughs. She specializes in hedge witchery and poisonous plants, and along with Christopher, founded the Black Tree Coven. Christopher, Tara Love, we welcome both of you to Beyond Reality Radio. How are you tonight?
Oh, thank you for having us. We are well.
Hello.
Yes, thanks for being with us. And before we get into the subject of witchcraft, which we're going to go into quite a bit of detail over the next couple of hours, I want to talk specifically about the title, which I find very interesting. I looked up some of these terms that I was not familiar with. And if I'm incorrect in anything that I've said, please feel free to correct me. But as I understand it, besom is kind of the traditional witch's broom with twigs tied at the end of a broomstick, right? More or less?
Pretty much.
Okay.
Pretty much. I mean, we've heard besom and we've heard besom.
Okay.
But, you know, they're both, you know, I say potato, you say potato kind of thing.
All right. And a stang.
It's more of a traditional word.
Yeah.
Broom. A little fancier sounding, you know.
Yeah. Stang.
That's for the people on the inside, you know.
Okay. Now, a stang is a staff that has like a fork at the end of it?
Yeah, it's like a forked branch.
Okay.
And it's generally about like person height, and it's used to connect the above and the below. It represents the world tree.
Okay. And a sword, I guess, is self-explanatory. So these are essentially what the symbols or images that we associate with witchcraft?
Yes. Yeah, along with a lot of other things. In our tradition, specifically the Black Tree tradition, those are primary tools that we use in our practice. So hence the title of the book.
Yeah. Let's begin with traditional witchcraft. When we use that term, and this is what you talk about in the book, but when we use the term traditional witchcraft, let's begin there. What exactly do we mean by that?
Well, the term itself is a pretty big umbrella term, and it branches off into two different directions when you use that phrase. You can either mean cultural practices like hoodoo and brujeria and things like that, or you can mean magical traditions like Clan of Tubal Cain, Cultus Sabati, 1734. We tend to not use it in the regards of cultural practices because you need a lot more time and words to go into those and do them the justice that they deserve.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of those practitioners also don't necessarily identify as witches. But if you look at it from the other perspective, traditional witchcraft, it's generally non-Wiccan, although there are some people who will say British traditional Wicca falls under traditional witchcraft. But the traditions or paths that fall under the heading of traditional witchcraft, they tend to be more of an introspective nature. And the work is more heavily centered in individual shamanic practices and connection with the land rather than any actual deity veneration. A lot of it goes back to using folklore and witch trial records and literature and mythology and things like that to get the tools and information that you need to to practice traditional witchcraft rather than going through any type of dogma or religious lineup.
Now, when we talk about traditional witchcraft, is this a religion or not?
No, I don't honestly feel that witchcraft itself is actually a religion. I know that statement would disagree with a lot of people. I mean, because witchcraft, the term has been applied in so many different contexts and in relation to so many different religious traditions that to say witchcraft is a religion ignores the fact that, you know, Christians from hundreds of years ago were accused of practicing witchcraft and burned at the stake. So it's a little bit of a weird contradiction in understandings. So in our perspective and how we talk about it in the book, we specifically present witchcraft as a practice and not as a religion.
Okay, I see. Now, let's take it a step further because you both espouse regional witchcraft. Yes. Explain what that is.
A lot of people who get into things like this, in the beginner primer books, you see things about picking your pantheon, and it's always connected to ancient European cultures and the Celts and the English, and it's somebody in Des Moines, Iowa, who's connecting it to this very far away energy. And the way that we view it is, why are you going to plug your vacuum cleaner into the electrical plug that is down the street? Plug it into the plug that is next to you. Mm-hmm. Where you're at is going to be so much more powerful and so much more meaningful to you just as a person and as a witch or as anybody following any type of spiritual path. Like the land that you live on is so much more just connected to you rather than some country that you've never been to and probably never will be to.
Yeah.
So we definitely take a very strong look at the land around us for what we do, how it shapes our practice, the things that we learn. And since we've started actually recognizing doing that, I've just learned a lot about myself as a person. I've learned a lot about myself as a witch. I've learned a lot about just how the world works in general. So it's something that I vastly prefer rather than going, very far away.
Now, when you talk about the land, is there an implication of rural settings, or can this be urban, suburban?
No, it's absolutely not just rural. The land is not just what's wild. You find the same type of land energy in the cities. I mean, cities are living creatures all their own. They have blood vessels and nervous centers, and they become like something that just has its own consciousness, just like a forest.
Yeah.
It's just built out of concrete and glass rather than something organic.
Now, you both live in southern New Jersey. Are you in a city setting?
No.
We kind of call it semi-rural. We're on the edge. We don't have too many neighbors, but we also don't have to drive like half an hour to go to a grocery store. And we're pretty close to a major city.
Yeah. And you're both in the same location, right?
Yes.
Okay.
We've been together for 17 years. And we just got officially married in September.
Oh, congratulations.
Hooray!
Very nice.
Thank you.
I did not have that in the information here, so that's...
No, we didn't include it.
Okay. Christopher, how did you get started in this?
Oh, man.
Time Life books.
Time Life books, maybe. No. I mean, my interest in the occult and even the paranormal stretches back to when I was a child, honestly. It's when I saw my first ghost as a child, and it always, that initial thing sparked my interest in all of this stuff. And I always kind of held that interest because of that. So, Time Life books, the Mysteries of the Unknown series, I was a big fan of. But I think like my direct immersion into witchcraft and the occult, as far as I think where I'm at now, I always held the interest since I was a child, but I think to find the point in my life and the reason that I got into it now is because I found Scott Cunningham's book, Earth, Air, Fire, and Water, at the local bookstore. And I did some spells from that, and that kind of sparked my interest heavily in magic and the occult.
You mentioned that you saw a ghost as a child. How old were you?
I think I was like 2 or 3. It's my youngest memory.
Really, that far back? Wow.
Yeah, and because it burned itself in my head, because it was something that I saw on 3 consecutive nights. And at the time, as a child, I always attributed that to my grandfather, who had passed away around that time. So I always, I saw this thing in my doorway 3 nights in a row at a particular point in my life. That stuck with me.
Yeah, wow. How about you, Tara Love? How did this begin for you?
I've always been kind of a weird kid. My family moved around a lot when I was a kid, and I usually refer to my childhood as having been raised by wolves. I was the youngest of 3 kids. I had 2 older brothers who were quote-unquote bad. So there wasn't a lot of attention that was directed towards me, so I kind of just did whatever I wanted. And being a weird kid, that mostly involved hanging out in the woods by myself and reading books. I always kind of had like a little quirk to me where I would sit in the woods and start to like stare at the patterns that were made by the light going through the leaves on the trees. And it would kind of put me into like this state where I would have what I see now as visions, but I used to call them dreams then. I read everything I could get my hands on like every single fairy tale and folk tale and different culture mythologies like Greek and Roman and Russian, because I'm from Russian descent. Anything I could get my hands on, just like totally absorbed all of it. And when I was probably around like 9, 10, 11-ish, I actually started writing like my own little spells for things.
Really?
And doing stuff like that, because I saw that there were rights that needed to be wronged in my world, and that was the only power that I had to try and do it. And then, like, growing up and going through teenage and high school, I started finding these books, and as an adult, it just kept, like, steamrolling. And I went through a few different types of spiritual paths before I just kind of was just like, you know what, I don't need any gods.
Did you have any kind of supernatural experience like Christopher? Any ghostly sighting?
When I was a kid, I was sleeping in my oldest brother's bedroom, and I don't know why I was in there, but I was probably about 3 or 4, and there were like a bunch of people out in the living room, and I remember the bedroom door opening and something coming into the room that looks like a white shape on all 4s, like a really large dog. But it wasn't a dog, it was just like dog kind of shaped. And it walked over to the bed, and I don't remember what its face looked like. I only remember like the white shape. And it pulled my hair really hard. And I started screaming, like you do.
Yeah.
And the shape ran out of the room, and I don't remember what adult came into the room. I forget.
We're going to pause right there because we have a break coming up at the bottom of the hour. We are just getting started, though, with our 2 guests. They are the authors of Besom, Stang, and Sword, or Besom, Stang, and Sword, new book that is out on the subject of witchcraft. Christopher Orapello, Tara Love Maguire, our guests tonight on Beyond Reality Radio. Stay with us. listening to Beyond Reality Radio. It's a late night Tuesday. Jason and JV have the night off, have the week off as well. Bruce Marcuson, glad to be the guest host and glad to be joined by our two guests, authors of Besom, Stang, and Sword. A look at witchcraft. Joining us tonight, Christopher Orapello and Tara Love Maguire from South New Jersey. Let's pick up the conversation with both Christopher and Tara Love. I'm curious about putting this book together. It's the first book that you have each put together, and it's received wonderful reviews. We'll talk more about that as we move along. But when you put this book together, did you intend it to be sort of a guide to maybe beginners looking to become practitioners of witchcraft? Was that part of the focus here?
Definitely. Definitely, Bruce. It was also meant to be a really good first look or accessible book on traditional witchcraft, because so many of those types of books are from independent publishers, and they're tough to find, but you don't really tend to find them in the bookstore. But yeah, Besom, Stang, and Sword is definitely meant to be a good entryway into witchcraft, because there's not most of the books that people will find on witchcraft are all very Wicca-based.
Wicca-centric.
And Wicca-centric. So we wanted to provide another avenue for people to get involved in witchcraft, and we think to give them what we feel is a better understanding and better foundation in what witchcraft is, so they don't have to go through what some of us had to go through, which was it's true, like fleshing out and dealing with any of the dogma versus practice kind of stuff, and what Wicca is versus what it isn't. And there's a lot of things blended into Wicca, a lot of 19th century occultism and magical systems all blended into Wicca. And when you stumble upon that, and it's very complicated, and you don't really realize what's what, and you don't know what you need, what you don't need, why all this stuff is here, where it all comes from. And we wanted to provide somebody with a very bare bones, no nonsense kind of approach to the subject. So
I'm relatively new to the subject. I know a little bit about it, but I'm certainly not anywhere near an expert. So for someone like me, I'm going to be able to understand the terminology, the basic themes.
I think so. A lot of the themes that we use in there, if they're a little too esoteric or 201, we explain them. There's a certain learning curve of things that we expect people to know, like you're going to know what meditation is, you're going to know what divination is. But for some of the things that are just a little more obscure, we definitely go into descriptions and definitions and where it came from and things like that.
Now, can anybody practice this, or do you have to be of a certain personality type, a certain background?
I think the material, I think anyone can practice this if they want to, and I think that is what has been lacking in a lot of the last 100 years in regards to modern witchcraft practice, is that there's this veil of gatekeeping, where people have to be initiated or they need a mentor or what have you. If you want to practice witchcraft, all you have to do, if you want to practice witchcraft, you can practice it, and you're going to with a book like ours, definitely.
Yeah. So a very welcoming approach.
Yeah.
Very much so.
Yeah.
I mean, Black Tree itself is an initiatory tradition. We don't show everything in the book. But what we do show is very, very definitely designed for just anybody to be able to practice that kind of witchcraft, because everyone has the potential to practice witchcraft. It's like any other skill. You just have to put the time and the study and the practice into it.
Now, if someone comes from a certain religious background, would the precepts that traditional witchcraft emphasizes, would they come into conflict with those religious beliefs? Is that a concern?
For some people, it might be. It all depends on how comfortable they are in their own skin and with their gods. I mean, one of our coven members is Catholic.
Okay, right.
And he's cool with everything, but he's got a pretty good grasp of his relationship with his chosen path. Some other people might not be as okay with that, or they might be a little too, not a little too, I don't want to say it like that, it sounds Protestant, I don't mean, but they might be more heavily invested in literal interpretations of translations upon translations upon translations of certain religious texts, rather than their own personal connection with their deity.
Now, let's talk a little bit more about what we mentioned in the opening segment about the regional practices and what you, in your area, you're in southern New Jersey, so you're not too far from where we are here in upstate New York. But what are some of the things about your witchcraft that makes it a little bit special because of the region you're in?
Well, we live not too far away from the Pine Barrens in New Jersey. We're maybe about 20 minutes away from it. And for anybody who does not know, the Pine Barrens are an enormous pinelands reserve. It's about 1 million acres that goes up and down parts of New Jersey. And it is an extremely primal place if you go to it. A lot of it is largely untouched. I mean, there's some homes and businesses that are built in there, but by large, it's a protected forest.
Yeah. What's the biggest city near there?
What's that?
What's the biggest city that's nearby?
Near us, Philadelphia, but there's definitely other cities that are also close to the Pine Barrens, just in different parts of it.
Yeah.
But for us, it's Philly.
So this seems like an interesting backdrop to practice witchcraft in.
It has its neat flair. I mean, Jersey has their own state monster who lives in the Pine Barrens.
Yes. Some people are familiar with the Jersey Devil, the hockey team, but they're not familiar with the Jersey Devil, the local state monster.
Right. Now, does that tie in at all to witchcraft, or is that totally separate?
We tie it in because we take a very animistic approach to our practice. So we acknowledge the ancestors, and we also acknowledge land spirits, and we view things like, or beings like the Jersey Devil, as being a spirit of the land, and in a sense, because it's folklore, actually it being a manifestation of the land itself through the people who inhabit it.
Yeah.
It's interesting because, like, in a lot of modern witchcraft practices, they have this being called Herne, like Herne the Hunter, and Herne the Hunter is a being that haunts a forest over in the UK, the forest in Windsor in the UK. And when I learned about Herne, he reminded me a hell of a lot of the Jersey Devil. And I was like, why is Herne the Hunter being revered by people in Australia and people in America, or even people in South Jersey, when we have our own local spirit that haunts a forest here? Why are we acknowledging a spirit that's haunting a forest overseas?
Yeah.
So when I realized that, it shifted my focus heavily to the local landscape. So, like, wherever you're living, like you're up in New York, you have the Witch of Saratoga up in New York, for example. So, like, that would be like your local spirit, your primary genus loci spirit, in a sense. Genus loci being the spirit of the land or spirits of the land. This often manifests as lore of the land that deals with actual spirits that apparently inhabit certain areas, or in the consciousness of the landscape itself. Different cities have different feelings to them. Different areas of the forest have different feelings to them. Some areas are more inviting. Some areas are not so inviting. You get this feeling in your gut of when you should stay and when you should go when you're walking through an untouched forest.
So the Jersey Devil is a spirit.
That's how we tend to view it.
Yeah. Yes. What are some of the characteristics of the Jersey Devil for those not aware?
The Jersey Devil is this hybrid of a creature with this, like, head of a horse, face of a dog, bat wings, claws, the serpentine tail, and goat legs.
Yeah.
it's very devil-like, but very odd looking at the same time with its horse dog-like head and horns.
Now that is about as frightening a description as I could imagine. Have either of you seen?
As far as I know, he doesn't play hockey. As far as I know.
Right. Have either of you seen this spirit in any form?
Oh, really? Tara, really? Yeah.
No,
no, you have not.
I mean, every kid in South Jersey's got a Jersey Devil story, but it's always turning out to be like a raccoon or a possum or a coyote or something like that.
Yeah, yeah. I remember there was a movie that came out probably 10, 15 years ago. It was not a particularly good movie with Lou Diamond Phillips about the Jersey Devil. I don't know if you saw that one.
No.
Okay.
There's another good one that's just called The Barons that has Stephen Moyer from True Blood in it.
Okay.
That came out like a couple of years ago. That one's also pretty bad, but it's fun to watch.
Yeah. Now, tell me a little bit more about the Black Tree Coven. Both of you are the founders of the coven.
Yes.
When exactly did it start? How large is your membership right now?
Well, we started 2013, 2014-ish is when we actively started trying to put things together. 2014.
Yeah.
Chris and I had been together for quite some time at that point, and we actually didn't practice together. We had two very separate and different spiritual paths. At the time, he was involved in Gardnerian Wicca, and at the time, I was involved in Haitian Voodoo. And, you know, we had been together for many, many years, but we just never practiced together. And the both of us came to our own conclusions about what we were doing and kind of were floundering around, not knowing what to do, and said, well, why don't we try to practice together for the first time? And then just from trial and error and bickering and compromise, it started to turn into its own little entity. And then it just started becoming more and more of a thing.
Yeah.
Our membership right now is very small because the structuring of the coven was put on hold for a while. One, when we started writing the book, but also when, at the same time, we were undergoing an emergency with my family. My brother at the time had been diagnosed with terminal cancer, so I was his caretaker. And a lot of the people that we had down as like petitioning the coven, we had to put them on hold. But at any given point, a coven in Blacktree can only have 12 members. I mean, there can be lots and lots of people in the tradition itself, but a coven itself can only be 12 members.
Oh,
and
really?
then the 13th member being the Jersey Devil.
And someone has to
We
petition.
take that number from the lore of the Jersey Devil. The Jersey
Being the
Devil
13th
being the
child.
13th
Yeah.
child.
Yeah.
So it's,
I kind of backed into that one, sorry.
Yeah. And someone actually has to petition you to gain entrance?
Yes. Because we want... A coven is like a family that you get to choose. And we want it to be something that runs well and that people get along with each other. And, you know, there's no fighting and no bickering. I mean, there's going to be a little bit because that's just normal human nature.
Sure.
But we've seen so many other groups and covens fall apart because of crappy group dynamics.
yeah, and covens themselves are they're such a tight-knit group. It's a small group of people. You know, like in a Masonic lodge, I'm a Freemason, so like in a Masonic lodge, you have a lot of people. It's a very large space for the most part, and you could go a while without really interacting with the guy on the other side of the room. But when you're in a coven environment, you are forced to interact with everybody.
Yeah.
So you have to have a really nice blend of people. Mm-hmm. So in regards to just the coven, it's more about quality instead of quantity.
Yeah.
That's what, you know, I don't mean to judge people, but it's just kind of like we want people that we can work with and that we want to work with and who work well with others, as opposed to just having a bunch of people so we can say that we have a bunch of people in our coven.
Well, that makes sense. Our guests are Tara Love Maguire and Christopher Orapello. They are both practitioners of witchcraft, authors of the brand new book that has received a number of very good reviews at Amazon.com and some other sources. The book is called Besom, Stang, and Sword, A Guide to Traditional Witchcraft, The Sixfold Path, and the Hidden Landscape. It is available from Red Wheel and Weiser Books. That's Weiser. I believe that's Weiser Books. We will continue with Christopher and Tara Love. You're listening to Beyond Reality Radio on a late night Tuesday. Stay with us. You're listening to Beyond Reality Radio. It's a late night Tuesday. Jason and JV on vacation this week, enjoying a little bit of winter downtime. My name is Bruce Markison. I'm guest hosting tonight and the next couple of nights as well. We continue our conversation with authors and practitioners of witchcraft. They're Tara Love Maguire and Christopher Orapello, and they have written the brand new book, Besom, Stang, and Sword. Christopher and Tara Love, one thing I failed to mention, you guys have a website that you operate and a podcast. Tell us about both of those, please.
The website is infinite-beyond.com, so it's infinite-beyond.com. And the podcast is called Down at the Crossroads, and it's where we interview. It's usually interview music-based. We interview authors and artists and musicians and what have you. The show itself is almost 10 years old. Been doing it since January of 2009. And in the beginning, it was just me, and then
I got suckered into it.
For the last couple of years, it's been Tara and I hosting the show and interviewing people. It's for free, so it can be found anywhere online that podcasts can be found, either through the iTunes podcast app or Google Play or even on Spotify. So,
how often do you do the podcast?
As often as life would allow.
Yeah.
We try for once a month, but it doesn't happen frequently.
Yeah.
Do you bring on...
Hopefully it'd be nice to do more than once a month, but life gets in the way sometimes. So,
do you bring on celebrities who have interests in witchcraft?
So I guess celebrities in our community. We're not talking to Christina Aguilera or whoever, but celebrities in our community. We have the honor of being able to speak with them, which is really nice to be able to sit down one-on-one with people like Judika Illes or Christopher Penczak and talk it out.
Yeah. I'm always curious about the URLs for different websites. Yours, Infinite-Beyond. What's the significance of Infinite and Beyond?
When the podcast first started back in 2009, the original show name was The Infinite and the Beyond. And so that's kind of where I got the domain from, and it's always been a part of the branding. So I was always afraid to move away from it, so I kept it. The original show, which can be found in the show feed for Down at the Crossroads, it's like the first 32 episodes are labeled TINTB, with Down at the Crossroads being labeled DATC. And the Infinite and the Beyond kind of pertain to the occult and the paranormal, pretty much dealing with the infinite and the beyond. That was the idea behind it. So that's where the name came from.
We actually have an investigator on the Infinite, Jonathan Gabriel, coming up on the Thursday night show. So that actually ties in very well to that theme. So again, the website is www.infinite-beyond.com. You can also find Christopher and Tara Love both on Facebook. Tara Love's name is Taralove, and then Maguire is spelled Maguire. So you can find Tara on Facebook and Christopher also on Facebook. Christopher's last name spelled Orapello, Christopher Orapello. We are going to continue the conversation on witchcraft. Our guests, Christopher Orapello and Tara Love Maguire, authors of Besom, Stang, and Sword. Stay with us. You're listening to Beyond Reality Radio. Witchcraft conversation continues.
paranormal that cannot be explained by scientific methods.
Told of a creature that was 6.5 to 7 feet tall.
The CIA ran secret mind control experiments.
It's a tale of a creature that's been seen by many, but believed by few.
And experts say there have been reported sightings of paranormal activity.
And there was this creature, and it ran down this hill.
They say something was flying over their house, and they have no idea what it was.
How the world's most powerful individuals are actually shape-shifting reptilians.
My scariest ghost hunting experience.
Jason and JV. Jason and JV. Jason and JV.
You want answers? I think I'm entitled. You want answers? I want the truth. You can't handle the truth. You can't handle the truth.
Beyond reality. Radio.
Hour number 2 of the show, Bruce Markison, guest hosting tonight. Jason and JV enjoying a little bit of vacation time in the midst of the winter, or at least in the beginning of the winter in the Northeast here. Jason, I'm not sure where Jason is, but I know that JV is somewhere in Florida where it's considerably warmer than where it is right now. But we're still enjoying things here in upstate New York and enjoying our conversation with our two guests tonight, Christopher Orapello and Tara Love Maguire. They are authors of a book that has received quite a bit of critical praise, a new book called Besom, Stang, and Sword, A Guide to Traditional Witchcraft, The Sixfold Path, and the Hidden Landscape. It's been described as a book that offers a fresh, spirit-based, non-religious practice of witchcraft without deities or holy days. It brings an authentic, traditional spiritual practice to light, but in a modern context, and also presents an accessible introduction to regional, traditional witchcraft. We continue with Christopher Orapello and Tara Love Maguire. I wanted to ask you about another piece of terminology in the title. We broke down the besom, stang, and sword part in hour number 1. What exactly, though, is the sixfold path that you reference in the other part of the title?
So, if everyone could cast their minds back to like 6th grade science class when you were learning about the elements in the periodic table and learning that if there was a substance that could be broken down to its most purest form that was only one molecule, we kind of took a look at that like witchcraft. Like if we broke witchcraft down to its barest components, we came up with six separate disciplines that comprise witchcraft, so the sixfold path. And those disciplines are history and lore, which is one, magic, divination, herbalism, necromancy, and head witchery. And all 6 of those things together comprise witchcraft.
All right, well, that makes sense. One of the things that has always fascinated me is the subject of necromancy.
Necromancy.
Which is, for those not aware, that's basically the effort to communicate with the dead in order to try to predict the future. Is that correct?
A little bit.
A little bit.
Communicate with the dead, sometimes just to get knowledge, not necessarily for future or divination purposes.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
And is that a subject that you go into quite a bit of depth in the book?
Yes. We the book itself, the 6 paths are broken down in. They each have a chapter in the book. So necromancy has its own chapter.
I see.
So.
Now, have either of you had personal situations where you've been able to communicate with the dead?
Usually it comes in the form in a lot of our experiences either just through like scrying, where you're looking into incense or a black mirror, for example, or in what people refer to as unsubstantiated personal gnosis, where you're in conversation, like you said before. We have an ancestor altar, so we sit before the ancestor altar as a daily practice and just have conversation. And sometimes you'll get feelings of answers from that interaction. That's just one way that we employ necromancy. Necromancy itself is such a nebulous thing because a lot of people, it gets interpreted as, corpse divination or divination via a dead body.
And you don't do that at all.
Well, no. Unfortunately, Bruce, I don't have access to corpses.
Yeah, right. Just want to make that clear.
If there's any funeral directors out there who are willing to try some weird stuff, give us a call.
But that was something that was done quite a bit going back, probably 19th century, and obviously before then. I mean, that was a common thing.
Yeah, even further back. I mean, there's stories in all kinds of classical literature that talk about people attempting to contact the dead to find out information. I mean, Chris does a class on necromancy called Resurrecting Necromancy, and he tells this story about the witch of Erictho and how she was hired. Well, you tell it. You're the one who wrote it.
The story of Erictho comes from Pharsalia, which is an early, I think it's a Roman epic poem written by Lucan in the public domain, oddly enough, being so old as it is. But it tells of Erictho, who is employed by Sextus Pompeius to make contact with the dead so he can find out whether or not he was going to die in the battle the next day.
Right.
Erictho was this vile creature of a woman who lived outside of society and hung out in graveyards and caves and would steal corpses and body parts from battlefields and employ the spirits and employ the spirits into joining her army of shades. On this particular occasion, she sought out a body from the local battlefield that had no wounds to the lungs and drug it to the cave to summon the spirit of the soldier to answer her questions for Sextus Pompeius.
And you teach an entire course on this. Fascinating. Yeah. I mean, this is no, really. It really is amazing. You mentioned a term a moment ago, Christopher, black mirror. Explain exactly what that is. A
black mirror is one of the most coolest tools, but it's the simplest thing to make. It's literally like you take a picture frame that has a sheet, has the glass in it, and you paint the far side of the glass with like flat black spray paint. And then you put the piece of glass back into the frame and you look through the opposite side. So like the black mirror itself, it ends up looking under the right lighting conditions. It ends up looking like this black expanse, just this void that you would just look, this endless void that you would look into. And it allows you to kind of trance out and to not focus on anything, because when we're looking around a room, our eyes instantly focus on whatever we're looking at, whether it's a chair or a table or the cat. But when you look into something like a black mirror, or even in a really, really dark space, your eyes are allowed to kind of phase out and not focus on anything, which causes a bit of a trance state. And because the black mirror itself is almost like the inside of your eye. Like when you have your eyes shut and you're going to sleep, and you might see the rods and cones in your eye are kind of pulling down from the daily activity. You might see impressions and shapes and forms on the inside of your eyelid. It's kind of along the same lines. I mean, a lot of divination is just about interpreting abstract shapes or symbols or a symbolic language, like in tarot, where we're studying pictures and interpreting pictures in a language on its own. So, like, a black mirror is like really cool and really easy to make. So, with very little expense on the part of the practitioner, you could have a black mirror in short of a day.
And now I know where the Netflix show came up with its name. That explains that.
Yes.
Our guests are Christopher Orapello and Tara Love Maguire. They are authors of the new book, Besom, Stang, and Sword. Tara Love, I want to talk about your background. We mentioned earlier you are practicing witch for 30 years, and you've had some major influences over time. Isabel Gowdy, Marie Laveau, and William S. Burroughs.
Yes.
Let's talk about each of those people. Laveau, I'm familiar with a little bit. She was in New Orleans, I guess 1800s, kind of a leading voodoo practitioner, right?
Mm-hmm. There's two Maries, the mother and the daughter, and they were very, very influential in shaping American voodoo. So there's her, because I very much have a deep love of that type of practice. Isabel Gowdy is actually a Scottish witch from the 1500s. I forget the year. But she's listed in the Scottish witch trials. And what's unique about her is that she didn't, when she was accused and brought before her accusers, she didn't deny anything. She was like totally psyched about talking about it. She was like, yeah, this is what happens. And I go here and we dance and they give me things and they've taught me how to heal and like all of this really great stuff that you don't normally hear about in the witch trials.
Yeah.
There's a really good book by a woman named Emma Wilby called The Visions of Isabel Gowdy that goes into like the witch trial records. And then
now, was she executed?
No, actually, she was not executed.
She survived the trials, really?
Yes, yeah.
And then the third person, a writer, an American writer, William S. Burroughs.
William S. Burroughs, who is probably most well known for his novel Naked Lunch. That was made into an awesome film in the early 90s, directed by David Cronenberg. William S. Burroughs was one of the Beats. He hung out with Kerouac and Allen Ginsberg and that whole crew of people, and he definitely had an occult flavor to the things that he wrote, but not overt like people would think it was. It's an undercurrent going through there. He talks about different realities that people live in and how to shift between them and how sometimes it just happens by accident. And I started reading Burroughs at probably an inappropriately early age, again, raised by wolves. And it really impacted me, and I think it really shaped my witchcraft.
When I think of writers of the occult, one of the names that always comes to mind is H.P. Lovecraft. Is he an influence at all?
We do. Chris and I are both fans of H.P. Lovecraft and the Cthulhu mythos and the things that he writes. He has a very eldritch horror kind of style. Cosmic horror, I think, is how they actually phrase it. We don't tend to work too much with that type of what people would call it current, just because the elder gods in the Lovecraft cosmology are, not a good time. They kind of really just want to mostly destroy humanity. But there are people who do absolutely work with them as their chosen paradigm, and they work within that structure. But we mostly keep Lovecraft for entertainment.
Yeah, he's become a controversial figure too, because it's turned out that he was pretty virulent racist, had some attitudes that we really would not tolerate today, and I guess it can be difficult to separate that from the quality of the writing.
It can, and it's a lot of the time when people dissect things like that from writers or artists from way back, they remove them from the context in which they happened in and place them in a modern context. And they say things like, oh, well, had I been around during that time, I would have done X, Y, and Z. And it's like, no, you probably wouldn't have, because you also would have been raised in that society in that time. And the viewpoints that someone like Lovecraft had were reprehensible. He was extremely xenophobic, very racist, very anti-Semitic, but strangely married a Jewish woman.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of arguments among Lovecraft scholars who some of them say that he was starting to kind of pull away from that mindset as he was getting older. But he also, he died pretty young.
Yeah.
And there's others who say, no, he was like that up until the day he died. And they just bicker back and forth about it endlessly. But I read Lovecraft within a modern context, keeping in mind what things were like then. And I don't venerate him like some people do. And I definitely acknowledge all of his flaws and repugnant viewpoints on particular peoples of the world.
We continue on a Tuesday night. Our guests, Christopher Orapello and Tara Love Maguire. They are practitioners of witchcraft, authors of the new book, Besom, Stang, and Sword, A Guide to Traditional Witchcraft, The Sixfold Path, and The Hidden Landscape. We will continue, really a fascinating subject of conversation, witchcraft. You're listening to Beyond Reality Radio. You're listening to Beyond Reality Radio. It's a late night Tuesday. Jason and JV have the week off. Bruce Marcuson filling in. And tonight we continue our conversation on witchcraft. Authors Christopher Orapello and Tara Love Maguire, their new book just out December 1st, Besom, Stang, and Sword. Christopher and Tara Love are witches. They are obviously authors and podcasters as well. And you can access their podcast by going to the website infinite-beyond.com. Again, that's infinite-beyond.com. Before the break, Christopher, we asked about Tara Love's influences, and she talked about Isabel Gowdy, Marie Laveau, William S. Burroughs. How about for you, Christopher? Who were the influences that really kind of helped shape your love of witchcraft, your interest in witchcraft?
Oh, man. That's a really tough question, actually. They're all over the place, really.
Yeah.
As far as what we're doing now with Black Tree, I would definitely say the work of Robert Cochran, born Roy Bowers back in 1931, top of my head. Definitely his influence is big in my current practice. As well as my path has wandered down so many different avenues, chaos magic, Thelema, some of the works of Aleister Crowley, a lot of the popular books on Wicca as well. Definitely had shaped and influenced my path, as well as just my Masonic background, which I got involved in Freemasonry to kind of understand some of the 19th century occultism and to see where that kind of got a lot of its influence from, which was the ritual structure of Freemasonry. Freemasonry itself is not occult related in any way, shape, or form, and me trying to clarify that makes me sound like I'm trying to cover something up.
Illuminati.
Yeah.
But a lot of that, all of that has definitely influenced my path in some way, shape, or form. My path is a little too spread out to really be so specific of an answer for you. I apologize.
No, that's fine. That's fine. Many influences along the way. We will continue with Christopher Orapello and Tara Love Maguire, authors of Besom, Stang, and Sword. Please stay with us. You're listening to Beyond Reality Radio. We will continue with the subject of witchcraft. Don't go away. You're listening to Beyond Reality Radio. Bruce Marcuson, guest host tonight. Jason and JV on vacation. They will return on Monday night. However, we will continue this evening with our two guests, Tara Love Maguire and Christopher Orapello, authors of Besom, Stang, and Sword, a book about traditional witchcraft, now newly available from Red Wheel and Wiser Books. Enjoying the conversation with them. We continue with Christopher and Tara Love. Tara Love, I wanted to pick up on one of the other of the six folds we mentioned earlier. We talked a little bit about necromancy. Another one that I'm not really familiar with at all, but is a specialty of yours, hedge witchery. What is that exactly?
Hedge witchery is a particular specialization in crossing the borders. Like there's worlds other than these. We talk about having the upper world, the middle world, which is what we are in, and then the lower world. And each set of those have their own border zone, like a demarcation zone, where it's a space that is in between. And one of the things with witches is that we journey to find information, we journey to speak with the ancestors, we journey for help, like all different types of things. We need something answered. That's what we go for. So to learn to cross that space, it's generally referred to as crossing the hedge. Now, hedge witchery itself, hedge witches are they're usually folk healers, spirit healers. They should have a very strong knowledge of plants, particularly those kind of plants that aid in the acquisition of altered states of consciousness for trance and things like journey work. Hedge witchery, I believe, is critical for a witch to have a solid base in, because without it, we're blind in our travels and we are deaf to our spirits. Hedge witchery has a very shamanistic quality to it, so it's separate from just herbalism, which is one of the other paths. And that distinction between the two is what gives witches the ability to travel and make contact with entities that are beyond our normal ken.
Now, you grow a collection of nightshades and other banes, and those are poisonous, right?
Yes. I have a poison plant garden. I mean, not right now because it's December. It's December in New Jersey and nothing grows here.
Yeah.
But during the warm months, I grow a variety of different poison plants. I grow a few different varieties of datura. I grow belladonna. I grow henbane. I grow monkshood and foxglove and some other things that aren't quite as baneful, like wormwood and mugwort. Mugwort's very medicinal. And it's interesting. It gets me into contact with the land. It gets me into contact with the particular spirits that are with those plants. You work with them. Some of them you have to be very, very careful in handling. Like monkshood and foxglove are very, very poisonous, but they sell them at places like Lowe's and Home Depot.
Now, just to the touch, they're poisonous?
Sometimes, like monkshood especially, the poison that's in that, if you have some type of cut or abrasion on your hand and some of the juice, like you break a leaf or you break a stem from monkshood and you get that inside of you, the poisoning action is so quick. It's like 20 minutes. And there is no antidote for it. All they can do is give supportive care to get you to ride through the poisoning action. Death is pretty significant chance of happening if you ingest it in any way.
Why deal with poisonous plants given their danger? How does that fit into witchcraft?
Well, some of it is about the liminality, because poison in itself is a very liminal entity, and the plants themselves, like monkshood, for instance, one of the names that it frequently gets called, even though it's a little incorrect, is wolfsbane. And wolfsbane is used against werewolves. Werewolves being an extremely liminal state. It's a state that is neither here nor there. Being a witch you have a foot in both worlds. You are neither here nor there. Working with plants like this, some of them you can actually use for different things, like if you know the proper dosages and how to work with them, like belladonna or henbane or mandrake is a very classical one that you'll hear about with this type of thing. But working with a plant like foxglove or monkshood, which is so virulently poisonous, you work more so with the spirit of the plant rather than the physicality of the plant. And in doing that, you learn about your own liminality. You learn about the fragility of your own mortality.
Yeah.
And I think it's something very important for anyone who's doing this type of witchcraft work to have that clear in their mind, like the fragility of moral existence.
So while your book is a guide to people that may be beginners, this part of witchcraft clearly is not.
Yes. We have a very small section in the hedge witchery chapter about the poison path. And we make some very clear statements in there about what the kind of mindset that people should have when they're working in things like this. Like in sabbatic witchcraft, they have the concept of the sabbatic virgin, which is every step that you take in your work is seen as being your first step.
Yeah.
Because then you don't fall prey to hubris. You always take all of the proper precautions. You act like you're going into it for the first time every time, and that's how you keep yourself safe. But somebody who's just stumbling into these things for the first time, they're going to come into it with all the vim and vigor of the world and thinking they know everything, and that's a very important lesson to learn.
Sure. When we talk about witchcraft, of course, everybody wants to talk about magic and spells. That's what it always seems to come down to, at least for the general public. And magic and spells are another one of the six folds on this path. So this is for either of you, either you or Christopher. Tell us a little bit more about exactly what kind of spells are involved in your kind of witchcraft.
We do a lot of folk magic-y kind of things. My background is very heavy on like hoodoo and root work and what I refer to as swamp witchery. There's not a whole lot of stand here, do this type of witchcraft, what a friend of ours, Deborah Castellano, refers to as fancy dancing. We have a level of it. Ritual is something that is very near and dear to particular people's hearts in our coven, and they don't want to let go of certain aspects of it, so I allow it. But we like to go for dirty magic, like working with plants and broken glass and making a witch bottle and burying that near your front step to protect your home, or doing a hot foot to get rid of somebody, not like that, to get somebody out of your life who's bothering you. Or in our book, we do a stop gossip spell that was influenced heavily by American hoodoo that involves like a cow's tongue and sewing it shut with nails and, writing your petition and stuffing it into the cow's tongue and things like that. It's your hands get dirty in it. It's not pretty.
Yeah, a lot of what we wanted to do with our presentation of witchcraft is to give witchcraft back its claws. It has been declawed over the years, specifically due to the satanic panic back in the 80s and 90s, where it was made to be very, very safe and friendly and sanitized. Yeah. And it's not necessarily the case. There's a whole aspect to the history of witchcraft which is scary, which is dangerous, which is something that you can prick your finger on. And we wanted to bring that back because it's a part of what it was. Yeah, and it's about the power, it's about the sovereignty that witchcraft presents, and it's an aspect of it that is a core aspect of it that it's identifying about it.
Yeah.
Witchcraft can be dirty. It's, you need to be responsible. It's not about dancing around with flowers in your hair. It's about, like Tara was saying, it can get dangerous and be dirty, and using broken glass and even certain bodily fluids, depending on things, because the traditional witch's bottle uses urine in it and blood. So,
but in
while
doing
anyone
that,
can practice it, it doesn't necessarily mean it is a thing that is for everybody.
Yeah. In doing that, have you received criticism?
I think there's always going to be criticism. If there's one group of people who are really good at criticizing everybody, it's a bunch of witches, especially online. Some people think that you don't need to get like your hands dirty like this to really be a witch. Some people believe witchcraft is only about goddess worship, which that's a different version of it. I mean, there's one of the things I always yell about is there's room in the pool for everybody.
Yeah.
It's just this is the particular kind of witchcraft that we practice.
So you face criticism from other witches who don't like what you're doing?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Can you say who they are?
Who sticks their neck out in the public is just subject to any kind of criticism. But yeah, absolutely. Because if you ask 5 different witches, what their definition of witchcraft is going to be, you're probably going to get somewhere in the realm of 37 answers.
Really? Can you say what this group of witches, what are they known by, or what? How do we identify them? Can you say that?
Oh no, it's not a particular group. It's just in general the community at large. There's always going to be people who criticize.
Yeah.
And actually, we've gotten a lot of praise over the fact that we're acknowledging the clause that witchcraft has.
Yeah. The praise has outnumbered the criticisms, definitely.
Right. Christopher, you describe yourself as both a witch and an animist. What's an animist?
An animist is someone who regards everything in creation as having an individual soul. You know, it's its own entity, it's its own being. So we're talking about like plants and trees and plants and rocks and even spaces and caves and certain landscapes. They all have a consciousness, a soul to them. So that's the gist of it. I mean, animism, at face value, someone might just equate animism with pantheism, which looks at everything emanating from a divine source, like some kind of a source. I don't think animism has that source idea. Mm-hmm. It's not everything stems from one place. It's just everything is these individual entities.
Everything has its spirit.
Yes, everything has a spirit.
Now, you perform spells, too, just like Tara Love, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Tell us about maybe a typical spell that you would be able to execute, if you will.
A lot of my spells, they get really simple, like a lot of quick chants, a lot of quick energy raising, drawing of sigils and symbols and just destroying them really quick, or anointing a candle and burning it. A lot of it is, just raising of energy and just letting it go and kind of like projecting it out into the universe. It's kind of like a hyper energetic, focused prayer in a sense.
When you're doing a spell, is this something you're doing by yourself or when you're with the rest of the coven?
You can do it in either environment, really. I mean, I think it's as long as that's one of the reasons you really need to feel comfortable with the people that you work with, because if you don't, there's going to be that weird little hiccup in the back of your brain that's going to keep you from being able to perform as well. Yeah. I think probably being alone is the best place to be until you're able to work with others. It's very revealing. It's very personal. So, things, they can be group-based spells. They can be individual spells. I think all of us have our greatest personal experiences alone. We all die alone. We're all born alone, in a sense. We all experience that on our own. And in a lot of ways, magic is no different. The things that we experience in ritual are very personal and individualistic, and you might see or hear things that other people may or may not experience. And that's the beauty of it, too, that it's all about the individual's path and what we can get out of it and what we can learn about it and the experiences that we have from it.
I know that one of your areas of particular interest is tarot cards. Tell us about that.
Oh, I love tarot. Tarot, it appeals to the artist in me, with its imagery and symbolism. It's a really interesting thing where you're able to, you shuffle the cards, at the standard 78 tarot deck, you shuffle the cards and you deal them out, and you shuffle them in a way where you go into trance yourself. You kind of phase out a little, and you deal the cards and you interpret them, and it's amazing how relevant they can be to your. I mean, they're supposed to be relevant, but even I think I'm a healthy skeptic. So even as a healthy skeptic, I'm always amazed by how relevant they are and how much they directly relate to what's going on in my life. Granted, that could just be me looking for certain things to make those connections and to make that make sense and apply to my life. But sometimes, when you see a lot of water and then you're dealing with a lot of water in life, for example, you're seeing water in the imagery and you're dealing with water in life. There's some interesting parallels that happen. Or you're dealing with a lot of job-related things and you see a lot of job-related things in the cards.
Yeah.
Tarot is an amazing tool, and it's just one of them. One of the amazing tools in a witch's cabinet.
Yeah.
I mean, divination in itself. There's so many different systems of divination. You can't even name or number them all. There's so many.
One other area that you're very interested in, quite talented at, is sculpting. Tell us about that.
Yes, I am an artist, and I have a background in sculpture. I sculpted two, I think, very important statues. Important in the sense that they're important to me and they mean something tremendous to me. And as an artist, I'm not one to toot my own horn at all, because I'll throw something out faster than anybody if I don't like it. But the two of these statues that I sculpted over the last couple of years, the Witch Lord statue and the Witch Queen, are really majestic. That's such a weird word, majestic. I don't want to call them majestic. There's something mysterious about them. Like, they are what they're not in a weird way. They're abstract representations of these primal forces in life, and they're both available for purchase from Sacred Source, which is a company that can be found online at sacredsource.com. I'm one of their signature artists, and you can find both the Witch Lord and the Witch Queen there. The imagery of the Witch Lord and the Witch Queen are actually derived from Eliphas Levi's drawing of Baphomet. It's a 19th century image. He's a 19th century occultist, a French occultist, and he drew an image that is very, very popular and often misconstrued as Satan, and I don't really like that interpretation of Baphomet, because I think that's really an oversimplification of the image itself. But the Witch Lord and the Witch Queen are derived directly from that image. So if you're familiar with the Witch Lord and the Witch Queen, who also make an appearance in our book, mind you, you can get some interesting information by looking at them and looking at Baphomet and looking at how they relate to each other too, and you can meditate on that and get some information from that as well. Just through that contemplation of the symbolism at play.
Our guests have been Christopher Orapello and Tara Love Maguire. They are witches, writers, podcasters. Their new book, Besom, Stang, and Sword, a guide to traditional witchcraft, The Sixfold Path and the Hidden Landscape, available from Red Wheel Books, and is receiving tremendous reviews from Amazon.com, among other sources. Thank you to both of you. Best of luck with the book. I hope it continues to do well.
Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Bruce. Thank you for having us.
We appreciate you being with us tonight. We'll get set to wrap up tonight's edition of Beyond Reality Radio in just a moment. Getting set to wrap up tonight's edition of Beyond Reality Radio. Again, our thanks to Christopher Orapello and Tara Love Maguire, witches, authors, and podcasters joining us tonight. Enjoyed the conversation with them. Hope you did as well. And a reminder that our next program tomorrow night, our guest will be another author. His name is Christopher Fulton, and he has written the book, The Inheritance, Poisoned Fruit of JFK's Assassination, actually co-authored by his wife. Christopher and his wife have unlocked some of the mysteries that have haunted our nation over the last 55 years. So that's coming up tomorrow night's edition of Beyond Reality Radio. We hope you've enjoyed the program, and make sure to follow us on Facebook and at beyondrealityradio.com. Have a good night, everyone.